that meant. You know, I had heard my mom through grief counseling that she had people talked about the power of just writing a letter, getting your feelings out and then burning it. Sure. And so, you know, I had some ups and downs through my life, and I wrote a diary, but it was weird looking back at it, is I wrote a diary with the idea of somebody maybe reading it one day. Mm-hmm. And so I felt like that I manufactured some of the stuff that was on the page. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That it wasn't just the raw emotion that I think like journaling should be.
Yeah.
Right? That it's you journal for yourself and you journal to get it out, not that in the hopes that 60 years later you'll have somebody find it and they're like, oh,
write
look.
a book.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, no. And so I would on and off, I would do it and then I wouldn't do it. And I didn't even know how to just manifest the emotions that I had inside. Like nobody helped me understand how to get that out. And so where the book came about was I had, you know, some shifts in different parts of my life, and people had said, you know, you've got a lot of stuff in your head, so you should get it out. And I thought, well, okay. But it wasn't intended to be a book. It was intended I had been in leadership in a lot of different roles, and then I had moved back into a sales role where I just had a territory. And people had shared, like, you just have a lot that you've learned, because I've been for the last 20 years, been a student of self-development, leadership development, and just trying to get better and better myself and then really work on how I can be a better leader to the teams that I worked with and the people that I worked with.
So is Unleased Potential more of a
self-development, like a personal development book?
Yes and no. It's an interesting thing. So where it came about is I'd put these modules together, and then I had hired a coach to help me, because I wanted to help and coach other people versus having people work for me that I coached. And because I being a manager in a leadership position in corporate world is people, you help develop them, but they feel like they have to listen to you. And so I thought, well, it'd be really cool to have somebody that only wants to work with me because they want to get better. And so I was going to start doing coaching on the side. And so I was like, well, I have to have some content. So I at least have a direction. So I just sat down and with the notes app on my phone, just started typing all these different thoughts. And then I would organize it. Then I would reorganize it. And I narrowed it down to 4 basic modules that I felt like could help people based on what my experiences had been, not only personally, but with other people.
Yeah.
And so when I was telling my coach that was helping me with my website, his name's Adam Davis, and he's a writer as well as a digital marketer. And he goes, man, you need to write a book. And I had this imposter syndrome. I was like, I'm just Jeff from Orlando.
Yeah.
At the time, I think I maybe had 150 followers on Instagram. I'm like, nobody even knows who I am. So what's the point of writing a book? Well, he persisted, and I'm so thankful that he did. So all this was at the beginning of this year. And so, you know, he coached me through the writing process, and this is really my journal, you know, and I'm so glad that you asked that question of, did I journal, is for this one, because I've read so many different self-development books. Most of these authors share a formula. If you follow this, you're going to be super successful. If you do this, you'll do that. Well, and I pieced it all together because some people, what they would say was not what was helpful for me. And so I would either dismiss it completely or not really pay a whole lot of attention to it. So really where this is this is where the 4 key areas that I've identified for me is understanding your strengths and weaknesses, the importance of communication, the importance of self-development, and setting the proper course or setting a plan. And those are just areas. And within the book, I tell stories of how I've managed to fix parts of my life with focusing on these 4 areas. And all I want to do is inspire people to think of their life in buckets that can then lead to them unleashing their potential without me saying, okay, this is specifically what you have to do if you want to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And because I don't want people to dismiss it. And even writing the book, it was one of those things where I just kept saying to myself, it's not something that I want to do. I don't know who in the world, who in the world would want to listen to me. What are the things that has to happen? So there's all the things that I was talking myself out of because I'm like, who in the world's going to want to listen to this?
You said you were like risk averse as a young kid, but the interesting thing about that is in the questions we had you answer, you said hard times were the most fulfilling to you personally. And isn't that the truth? Like the harder the experience, if you can get out of it and you can learn so much from that.
The more growth that happens from it. Yeah, you don't grow too much just sitting around doing nothing.
No,
I don't learn from anything if it's easy.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of the concept behind writing the book, because I knew it wasn't going to be easy per se, but fortunately I already had a framework put together, and the way my coach told me is, and this is where I encourage anybody to do it. And I know you guys have great stories. I highly encourage you to.
I would love to write a book, but I just don't know. Like I have ideas pop in to my head, and I write them down a little bit, and then like I turn the page, and then I start a new story. It's just extremely difficult.
Hey, maybe it could just have like 100 chapters.
Yeah.
And they're just really small thoughts.
So,
by Shane.
Great idea.
Yeah.
So Shane, let me give you this. And so this is where it's not as hard as we make it out to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in the same place. I'm like, I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do, what to put. So I'll break down in a small, manageable way that wouldn't require the coaching that Adam provided. So he provided.
This is your own personal advice for writing a book.
Correct.
Okay.
That I learned from Adam Davis. So it's not anything unique for me. And so what's incredible about it is the fact that so he said, okay, open a Word document, or if you have a notebook, if you like to write by hand, he's like, just write the title. And so the name of my coaching business is Active Futures. He's like, just write Active Futures. And I was like, well, Adam, that's a terrible name. He's like, just write it. He's like, you're thinking too much. Just write something as the title, even if you just put Shane's book. And then what he said to do, and then he goes, now have 10 chapters and write the name of 10 chapters that you want to cover.
Oh, that's a really good idea, because that's like just planning the book out.
Yep. So then he said, okay, then call me next week. So then I call him next week, and then he goes, okay, so you got your 10 chapters, right? And I said, yep. He goes, okay, now write down 4 basic things that you want to cover in each chapter. And then call me next week. I was like, oh, good grief. It sounds like a joke.
Yeah.
But I did it. So I just had my 10 chapters, and I had my 4 points. And I was like, okay, I've got it. And he goes, okay, here's what we're going to do. You want to focus on 2,500 words a chapter. And the reason why, you want to be consistent. So even if you think it's going to be 3,000 words, 5,000 words, you want to have consistent chapters, because as a reader, if you have one chapter that's short, one chapter that's really long, you get frustrated.
Yeah.
And he's like, and I also don't encourage long chapters, because if it's like me, I'm like counting the pages, like, okay, how long is this chapter?
Yeah,
like to read
that's exactly what I do.
When am I going to be done with this chapter?
And I'll go, whoo, this is 12 pages? I don't know if I want to read this one. And so I went through it. So he's like, okay, so what we're going to do is it's 2,500 words per chapter. So we're estimating you to do a 25,000 word book. So he's like, well, let's break that down. So this is February of this year.
Wow.
And he goes, okay, so if you write 300 words, that'll take you about 30 minutes. Most people, it'll take about 30 minutes.
So when did this book come out?
August of this year.
That's fast.
Yeah, man. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I started it, and I thought, okay, I'm going to do 30 minutes a day, 300 words per day. That means I could write the book in 6 months. So that's how he broke it down. He's like, I don't want it to seem difficult. Just do a little bit every day.
Mm-hmm.
Then the other thing that he had encouraged me to do, he's like, now when you start typing, just type. Don't edit. Don't stop. Just type. Don't let anybody read it. And he's like, just brain dump on the paper. He's like, we'll fix everything on the tail end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the biggest problem most people make is they try to edit it as they go, or they go, hey, would you read this? And then people just have to give their 2 cents.
Yeah.
And so then you get out of the
It's
flow.
almost like asking for disappointment.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so with that, so I started in February, and this was like late February, early March. And then we all know what happened in March.
Yeah.
So COVID hit.
Lockdown.
Yep. And so what was really cool about that is that, I was calling on doctors every day in the pharmaceutical market. And so the last person that they wanted to see was an outsider coming in, and I was doing oncology medication. Is that I'm the last person that needs to be going into an office.
Yeah.
And so with stay at home, I had extra time. And so I thought, okay, I've got extra time, so I'm going to type. So my kids were here, and guys, I'm telling you, I went through it. Some chapters took a little longer. Some didn't take as long. I finished it in April.
Wow.
And what was really cool about it is, so where my desk is, I also have a chair in my office, and my son, he's 12, 11 at the time, and he sits in the chair and was playing on his iPad. So I've been typing, and they knew that I was writing a book, but again, nobody had read it. I had not shown it to anybody. It's just, that's where it's at. And I finished typed the conclusion, and then I was like, wow, I just finished a book.
Yeah.
And so I turned around, and he was sitting there, and his name's Deuce. Well, we call him Deuce. And I go, buddy, I just finished my book. So he slowly looks up out of his iPad because I, annoyingly interrupted his Minecraft game or something.
Yeah.
And he's like, you know what, Dad? Even if nobody buys it, you know that you did it.
Yeah. That's.
And I said, I'm like, that's why I wrote it.
Yeah.
And it was so exciting to have it done. And then the longer process of editing, and that's where you have a good editor. But the big thing is that it taught me is everybody has a story inside them, and everybody needs to tell their story. So like Shane, you're telling your story via social media, which is powerful.
It is.
And I encourage you to do it more. And I know you were practicing doing some video stuff, and, do what makes you feel comfortable. But the more you do it, even for me, I'm not going to say for you, but for me, if I set out as if I could just help one person, and I helped my son the day that I finished it. If it never saw the light of day, he saw me sit down. They saw me focus.
They were proud of you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was an incredible experience to go through that. Not only formulating the stories that I not came up with it's recounted. They're all real stories that I went through. And the response so far has been very humbling. And it's also given me confidence because I grew up a fat kid, so I had zero confidence. And why would anybody want to listen to me? Why would anybody want to help? I was always taught humility, be humble. But it was almost an unhealthy humility. Yeah. Where you weren't supposed to have confidence.
Yeah. But the thing is that they should coincide with each other.
Yes.
You should be confident as well as humble. You can be super confident and not arrogant. I think people get that mixed up where they think that confidence is arrogance. It's not arrogance.
Yep.
I'm not being arrogant. I'm just very confident in who I am and what I can do.
Correct. Yeah. And that's even coming out with the book. I've had to step into that because finally my wife's like, you have to quit giving books away. Like I felt bad selling books.
Yeah.
Because I was like, these are people that were really close to me and they've supported me, and I'll just send them a book. She's like, you got to quit.
Yeah.
These things cost us money.
If they want it,
it costs money to make them.